Winter, 1966, Los Alamos County, New Mexico. The snow came early to the high desert that December, dusting the mesas white and turning the narrow roads treacherous. In the compound northeast of Los Alamos, behind chain-link fences topped with barbed wire and guard posts manned 24 hours a day, stood a cluster of buildings that appeared on no public maps. The sign at the main gate read simply, "Restricted Area, Government Property, Authorized Personnel Only." No name, no explanation. Just a warning. If you're loving the content, make sure to subscribe right now so you don't miss us in your recommendations. We upload new, exciting videos every day. Thank you for watching. Let's get into it. This was the Western Applied Research Laboratory, known to those who worked there simply as WARL, one of dozens of facilities across the Southwest where the Cold War's invisible weapons were being forged. Not missiles or bombs, though those were being built elsewhere in the complex. Here the work was more subtle. Advanced polymers for heat shields, experimental composites for satellite components, classified materials that would protect American technology from the vacuum of space and the heat of re-entry. The work was secret. The budgets were enormous. The security was absolute. Getting hired at WARL meant surviving a background investigation that could take 6 months. The FBI would interview your neighbors, your teachers, your ex-girlfriends. They'd examine your financial records, your travel history, every address you'd lived at since birth. If they found anything questionable, a relative who'd joined the Communist Party, even briefly in the 1930s, a college roommate who'd been arrested at a protest, a cousin who'd defected to Canada, you were done. No explanation, no appeal, just a form letter. Your application for security clearance has been denied. Those who made it through were the elite, or so they were told. Scientists and engineers with spotless records and unquestionable loyalty. In exchange for their discretion, they received salaries well above industry standard, health insurance that covered everything, and first pick of the limited housing in the company town that had sprung up around the facility. Eleanor Winters arrived at WARL in September 1966, fresh out of Berkeley with a master's degree in polymer chemistry and dreams of doing something that mattered. She was 22 years old, small and fine-boned, with pale blonde hair she wore in a practical ponytail, gray eyes that missed nothing, and a quiet intensity that made her professors predict great things. She'd grown up in Bakersfield, California, the only child of 2 high school teachers who'd scrimped and saved to send her to college. Her father taught physics and math, her mother English literature. They were educated but poor, living in a tract house on the wrong side of town, driving a car held together with prayer and duct tape. Eleanor had been their one great investment, and she'd repaid them with perfect grades, scholarships, and now, finally, a real job with a real salary at a facility doing work so important she couldn't even tell them what it was. She'd been assigned to Housing Unit D7, a small apartment in one of the prefabricated buildings erected hastily in the early 1960s when the facility expanded. 2 bedrooms, a kitchenette, a bathroom with a shower that worked most of the time. She shared it with another young woman, Judith Kern, a technician in one of the testing labs. The rent was deducted automatically from her paycheck, $40 a month, cheap even by 1966 standards. Her salary was $8,400 a year, more money than her parents made combined, and for the first time in her life, Eleanor felt like she could breathe. She sent $200 home every month, saved another $100, spent the rest on books, a decent winter coat, groceries from the commissary where prices were subsidized. On her first day, September 12, 1966, Eleanor walked through the main gate at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes early. The guard checked her brand new badge 3 times, comparing her face to the photo before waving her through. The compound was larger than she'd expected. The main administration building, 3 laboratory wings, a fabrication shop, a small cafeteria, and beyond those, the classified zones she had only been briefed about in general terms. Everything was beige and functional, built to withstand the harsh climate and revealing nothing about what happened inside. She reported to Lab 3, Polymer Research Division, on the second floor of Building C. The lab was a large open space with high ceilings, fluorescent lights, rows of workbenches equipped with fume hoods, analytical instruments, and storage cabinets for chemicals. It smelled of solvents and hot metal. 12 people worked there. The lab director, 2 senior research chemists, 4 chemists, 3 technicians, a secretary, and a janitor who came by in the evenings. Eleanor was introduced to the group at the morning meeting. They sized her up with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She looked young, younger than 22, almost like a college freshman. Someone muttered, "baby face," and it stuck. Not maliciously, but it marked her as the new kid, the one who had everything to prove. The lab director was Dr. Lawrence Clayton Birch. 47 years old, he'd been running Lab 3 for 9 years. Tall and heavy-set, with a square jaw, steel gray hair trimmed military short, and small dark eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they looked at. He spoke in a slow, deliberate baritone that made every statement sound like a pronouncement. Korean War veteran. He'd served as a chemical warfare officer, though he never talked about the details. PhD from Caltech, 1954. The walls of his office were covered with framed photographs. Birch shaking hands with a senator, Birch at a test site in the Nevada desert, Birch receiving an award from the Department of Defense. Power, status, respect. At Worrell, Birch wasn't just a lab director. He was untouchable. The facility director, General Howard Prescott, retired Air Force, had served with Birch in Korea. They were drinking buddies, hunting partners. That relationship made Birch bulletproof. He could promote or destroy careers with a single performance review. Everyone was careful around him. The first 2 months, Eleanor kept her head down. Her tasks were straightforward: prepare polymer samples according to established protocols, run routine analyses, record data in lab notebooks, maintain equipment, keep her workspace clean. She arrived at 7:30 every morning, left at 5 p.m. like everyone else. She ate lunch in the cafeteria, usually a sandwich and coffee for 65 cents, sitting with the other junior staff. Evenings, she returned to her apartment, made dinner in the tiny kitchen, read scientific journals, listened to the radio. Her life was orderly, predictable, safe. Dr. Birch treated her correctly, almost paternally. He'd stop by her bench occasionally, review her work, nod approval. "Good precision on these measurements, Winters. Keep it up." Sometimes he'd point out errors. "You miscalculated the molar ratio here. Redo this sample." But without anger, almost kindly. Eleanor thought she'd lucked out. She'd heard horror stories from Berkeley classmates about abusive advisors who screamed, belittled, stole credit. Dr. Birch seemed firm but fair. That's what she thought. Something changed in November. Eleanor didn't understand what exactly. Maybe it was the incident at the progress review meeting on November 18th when they were discussing quarterly results. Dr. Raymond Kowalski, one of the senior chemists, a man in his mid-40s, was presenting data on a new high-temperature resistant polymer. He showed graphs, tables of thermal stability measurements. Eleanor sat in the corner taking notes. And then she noticed something wrong. One of the tables didn't make sense. If you calculated backwards from the degradation temperature to the activation energy using the equation he'd presented, the numbers were off by a factor of 10. She double-checked her mental math. No, Kowalski had made an error. Eleanor hesitated. Should she say something? On one hand, accuracy was critical. This data would go into reports for DoD contractors. On the other hand, Kowalski was a senior scientist with 17 years of experience, and she was a 22-year-old nobody who'd been there 8 weeks. Would they think she was being arrogant, a know-it-all? But then she thought, if the error gets into the official report and someone catches it later, it'll be worse. She raised her hand. "Dr. Kowalski, I think there might be an error in Table 4. If you back-calculate the activation energy from those degradation temps, it doesn't match the Arrhenius equation. I worked it out and got different values. She showed her calculations on her notepad. Kowalski frowned, took the pad, worked through it himself. His face went pale. You're right. Decimal point error. Thank you, Miss Winters. Dr. Birch, who'd been chairing the meeting, looked at Eleanor with sudden interest. Sharp eye, Winters. Errors like that can cost millions in fabrication. Good catch. Kowalski, get it corrected and resubmit by tomorrow. After the meeting, Birch called her into his office. Smart work today, he said, and there was genuine approval in his voice. I could tell from your transcript you weren't just another pretty face with a degree. We need people who think critically, who catch the mistakes others miss. You keep performing like this, you'll move up fast. From that day forward, something shifted. Birch started asking Eleanor to stay after hours. Miss Winters, I need you to review this data set before tomorrow's meeting with the client. Eleanor, we've got a deadline coming up. Can you work through some of these calculations tonight? I need someone I can trust to double-check these results before they go to Washington. She stayed. What choice did she have? He was her boss. Her performance reviews came from him. Her future depended on his recommendations. At first, it really was work. They'd sit in his office going over data, discussing experimental design, debating methodology. Then coffee appeared. Then cookies from the commissary. You've been on your feet all day, Eleanor. Have some coffee. Take a break. She drank the coffee, grateful. The conversations gradually drifted from technical topics to personal ones. You're not married, are you? No? Surprising for someone as bright and attractive as you. I'd think you'd have men lining up. Eleanor blushed, shook her head. I'm focused on my career right now, Dr. Birch. There'll be time for that later. He nodded, smiled. Smart girl. Career first, especially for someone with your potential. You know, I've been watching your work closely. You're not just competent, you're genuinely talented. Ray Kowalski's been here 15 years and makes twice your salary, but does he show initiative? Does he think independently? No. He follows instructions. But you're a real scientist. I'm thinking about promoting you to research associate next year. That's a 30% salary bump, plus better housing allocation. Eleanor's heart leaped. Research associate meant respect, meant real responsibility, meant she could help her parents more, maybe even afford to bring them out for a visit. On December 2nd, a Friday, Birch invited her to lunch, not in the cafeteria, but in his office. He had sandwiches brought in from the commissary, coffee in a thermos. I wanted to discuss your trajectory here, he said, closing the door. They sat at the small conference table in his office. He talked about her future, how she could lead her own research project within 2 years, how he could arrange for her to present at national conferences, get her name out there, how talented young scientists like her could rise fast with the right mentorship, the right advocate. You see, Eleanor, he said, leaning forward, in this field, it's not just about what you know. It's about who knows you, who vouches for you, who opens doors. I can do that for you. I've got connections at Oak Ridge, Los Alamos National Lab, even NASA. One word from me and you could have your pick of positions. But I need to know you're someone I can count on. Someone who's on the team. Eleanor listened, nodded, thanked him. She didn't notice how the other lab members were watching through the glass wall of his office. Didn't notice the looks exchanged, the eyebrows raised. Didn't understand that her reputation was being quietly shredded just by the fact that she was spending so much private time with Birch. That afternoon, heading back to the lab, she ran into Judith, her roommate, in the hallway. Judith worked in a different division, but everyone knew everyone at Worrell. It was too small a place for secrets. Judith gave her an odd look. So I hear you've been having private lunches with Birch. Her tone had an edge to it. We were discussing my project assignments, Eleanor said. Right, project assignments. Judith laughed, but it wasn't friendly. Look, I'm telling you this as a friend. Stay away from him.
He's got a reputation. Women who work for him don't last long. And you know why?
Why?
Eleanor asked quietly. Because he comes on to them. Starts with the after-hours work sessions, then the promises of promotion, then he expects favors. And if you say no, he destroys you. Writes you up for imaginary infractions, downgrades your reviews, gets you fired. 2 years ago, there was a woman named Patricia Halverson. Brilliant chemist, gorgeous, had a bright future. He made a move. She turned him down. 3 months later, she was gone. Officially fired for mishandling classified materials, but everyone knew the truth. She wouldn't sleep with him. Eleanor felt cold.
Are you serious?
Completely. So watch yourself. And if he asks you to meet him anywhere off-site, don't go. But it was already too late to stay away. On December 8th, a Thursday, Birch called Eleanor into his office after lunch and closed the door. His expression was grave. Eleanor, I need to discuss something sensitive with you. Please, sit down. She sat, her stomach nodding. I've been working on your promotion paperwork, he began, rubbing his temples. The recommendation is strong, but there's resistance from HR. They think you're too young, too inexperienced. Only 3 months on the job. They want proof of your reliability, your maturity, your commitment not just to the work but to the organization, to the leadership. He paused. Do you understand what I'm saying? She didn't. She stared at him with wide, confused eyes, and in her confusion, he saw opportunity. He'd done this before, many times. Young women, ambitious, from modest backgrounds, no connections, no protection, hungry for success, easy to manipulate. Here's what I'm proposing, he said, leaning closer. I have an apartment in town, a small place on Canyon Road that the company keeps for visiting consultants. Quiet, private. Sometimes I work there in the evenings on classified reports that can't leave the facility during business hours. If you could assist me, say, for a week or two, helping organize materials, reviewing calculations, it would demonstrate exactly the kind of dedication that HR wants to see. I could tell them you're not just a 9-to-5 employee, that you're committed, that you can handle responsibility, and then your promotion would go through without any issues. Plus, I could arrange for your permanent residency status to be upgraded. Right now you're on temporary housing, but permanent residents get better apartments, more benefits. What do you say? Eleanor hesitated. Something about his tone, the way he was looking at her, made her nervous. But he was talking about work, about her promotion, about her future. Can I think about it, Dr. Birch? She asked quietly. His face hardened instantly like a switch had flipped. Think about it. Eleanor, I'm going to be straight with you. I'm a direct person. In my world, you're either with me or against me. There's no middle ground. Now, I've already drafted some documentation about performance issues you've been having. Tardiness, errors in your lab notebooks, carelessness with classified materials. 3 documented infractions and you're terminated. That's company policy. And with those kinds of infractions on your record, you won't find work anywhere else in the defense industry. You'll be lucky to get a job teaching high school chemistry. Your master's degree will be worthless. Your parents will be so disappointed. Is that what you want? Eleanor went pale. But that's not true. I've never been late. I haven't made any— Who do you think they'll believe? He interrupted. Me, with a PhD and 20 years in the field, medals from the DoD, security clearance at the highest level? Or you, a 22-year-old nobody fresh out of grad school? I have witnesses who'll confirm whatever I say. Do you have anyone who will vouch for you? Think carefully about your next move. Tomorrow evening, 7 p.m., 428 Canyon Road, apartment 3B.
I'll be waiting. If you don't show up, then you've made your choice, and I'll know exactly what kind of person you are. Monday morning, you'll find that first write-up in your file. Dismissed. Eleanor walked out of that office on shaking legs. She barely made it to the women's bathroom before she vomited, stood at the sink splashing cold water on her face, staring at her pale reflection in the mirror. What could she do? Who could she tell? HR? But Birch had connections throughout the company. The facility director was his friend. Corporate security reported to the director. Who else? The police? And say what? My boss invited me to his apartment to work and I'm scared? They'd laugh at her. Or worse, assume she was leading him on, trying to use sex to advance her career and then getting cold feet. In 1966 America, there were no sexual harassment laws, no Title VII protections. Those wouldn't exist until 1972. No HR departments trained to handle abuse. No hotlines, no advocates, no policies. If a boss wanted to proposition his secretary, his technician, his researcher, he could. And if she complained, she was the troublemaker. She was the one who got fired, blacklisted, destroyed. The man? He'd get a slap on the wrist at most. More likely, nothing at all. She was asking for it. She dressed provocatively. She knew what she was getting into. That's what they'd say. That's what they always said. That night, Eleanor barely slept, lay in her narrow bed in the apartment she shared with Judith, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows. By morning, she'd made a decision. She'd go. Just once. Just to see what he really wanted. Maybe she'd misread the situation. Maybe it really would be work. Maybe she was overreacting. And if it wasn't work, if he tried something, she'd leave immediately. He was a respected scientist, a decorated veteran. Surely he wouldn't actually hurt her. Surely there were limits. She convinced herself of this because the alternative, refusing and losing everything she'd worked for, was unbearable. On Friday, December 9th at 6:45 p.m., Eleanor walked through the December cold to 428 Canyon Road. It was an older building, 2 stories, stucco walls painted pale yellow, with a small courtyard and exterior stairs. Apartment 3B was on the 2nd floor, facing the street. She stood at the door, hand raised to knock, heart pounding. Still time to turn around. Still time to run. But run where? Back to California with no job, no prospects, no future? She knocked. The door opened immediately, as if he'd been waiting right behind it. Eleanor. Good. I was starting to think you'd changed your mind. Come in, come in. The apartment was small. Living room, kitchenette, bedroom, bathroom. Dark, with heavy curtains drawn over the windows. Furniture was minimal and generic. A couch, a coffee table, a small dining table with 2 chairs. On the table sat a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. Next to it, a plate with cheese and crackers. No papers, no files, no data to review. No work at all. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Dr. Birch, you said we'd be working on classified reports. We will, he said smoothly, closing the door behind her. But first, let's relax a bit. You look so tense. Have a drink. It'll help you unwind. I don't drink, she said. Then you'll have a soft drink. I bought some Coca-Cola just for you. Sit down, Eleanor. Make yourself comfortable. She remained standing, inching toward the door. I think I should go. This was a mistake. He stepped between her and the exit, his bulk blocking the doorway. He was still smiling, but his eyes were cold. A mistake? Eleanor, surely you didn't think I actually needed help reviewing data. You're a smart girl. You knew what this was about. I don't understand what you— Don't play games with me, he said, and now the smile was gone. You knew. Women always know. And before you think about running out that door and causing problems, you should know something. I've already filed a report with facility security. A report stating that you approached me romantically, that you offered sexual favors in exchange for a promotion, and that I, as a professional and a gentleman, rejected your advances and felt obligated to document this inappropriate behavior. The report is in my office safe. If you leave now and make any kind of complaint, I submit that report to HR and security. And you know what happens then? You don't just get fired. You get investigated. Your security clearance gets pulled. Your name goes on a list that every defense contractor in the country checks before hiring. You become unemployable. Your parents, those school teachers in Bakersfield, they'll hear about it. Everyone in your hometown will hear that you tried to sleep your way to success and got caught. Is that what you want? Eleanor felt tears burning her eyes. What do you want from me? Right now, just your company. Just sit down, have a drink, talk with me. I'm a lonely man, Eleanor. My wife left me years ago. I work 80-hour weeks at a facility where I can't talk about my research with anyone outside. I just want some companionship, some conversation. Is that so terrible? He was lying. She knew he was lying, but she also knew she was trapped. She sat down on the couch, as far from him as possible, knees pressed together, arms crossed. He poured himself bourbon, poured her a Coke, sat down next to her, too close, talked about his work, his war service, his plans for the lab. She stared at the carpet, barely hearing him. He didn't touch her that night. Didn't need to. This was just the first move in a longer game. He was testing her, breaking down her resistance, training her to obey. At 9 p.m., he said, "All right, that's enough for tonight. You can go. But tomorrow, Saturday, I want you back here, same time. And Eleanor, don't tell anyone about this. People wouldn't understand. They'd think you were trying to seduce me for career advancement. You don't want that kind of talk, do you?" She shook her head mutely. Good girl. See you tomorrow. She fled the apartment, ran through the dark streets back to her own place. Judith wasn't home. Eleanor locked herself in the bathroom and cried until she was too exhausted to cry anymore. The next day, Saturday, she came back to the apartment, because what else could she do? He greeted her with that same false warmth, offered her food this time, sandwiches he'd bought from a deli, potato chips, more Coke. They sat in the dim living room. He talked. She stared at nothing. At some point, he casually mentioned, "You know, I called your apartment building manager this morning. Told him you'd be staying at a friend's place for the next couple of weeks while they're out of town. House sitting. Just so no one worries if they don't see you around." Eleanor's head snapped up. "What? Why would you?" "Because Monday, you're going on medical leave," he said calmly. "I already arranged it with the company doctor, Dr. Fisher. You've met him. He's an old friend. He's written you a sick note for severe bronchitis. 2 weeks off work. Paid. Everyone will think you're homesick in bed. But actually, you'll be here. With me." "I can't just disappear for 2 weeks. My roommate will notice. People will—" "Your roommate thinks you're visiting a sick relative. I already had someone call her and tell her you'd be away. As for your parents, don't worry. I had a message sent to them too, from you, saying you're busy with an important project and won't be able to call for a while. Everything's taken care of. You see, Eleanor, I've thought this through very carefully. No one will look for you. No one will ask questions. You're completely free to stay here with me. Isn't that nice?" She stared at him in horror. This wasn't improvised. This was planned, methodical. He'd done this before. "I want to leave," she whispered. "You can't leave," he said simply. "Because if you do, I'll destroy you. I already explained that. And now you've been here twice. You came voluntarily, didn't you? No one forced you. So if you suddenly claim I'm holding you prisoner, who's going to believe that? You'll look like you had a consensual affair with your boss and then regretted it and tried to cover it up with wild accusations. No, Eleanor. You're here now. You're mine. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. That night, he didn't let her leave. Stay here tonight, he said. Sleep on the couch. I'll take the bedroom. Door's open if you need anything. But when she tried the front door later, after he'd gone to bed, she found it locked from the outside, a deadbolt that required a key. She had no key. She was locked in. Panic seized her. She went to the window, second story, 20-foot drop to concrete below. She'd break both legs if she jumped. She checked every window in the apartment, all locked. No fire escape, no way out. She sat on the couch in the dark, hugging her knees, and finally understood the full scope of the trap. He had her documentation. He'd mentioned having her personnel file, her security clearance paperwork. He'd created a false narrative with the building manager, with her roommate, with her parents. He'd arranged medical leave that made her absence official. He'd locked her in physically. Every avenue of escape was closed. She was alone, imprisoned in a stranger's apartment, and no one in the world knew where she really was. The next 13 days blurred together into a nightmare of psychological torture. Birch was meticulous. Every morning he'd leave for work at 8 a.m., locking her in, return at 6 p.m. with groceries, sometimes takeout food. They'd eat dinner together. He'd talk about his day, his research, his frustrations with management. Treated her like a wife or a pet. Sometimes he'd tell her to sit next to him while he listened to the radio. He'd put his arm around her shoulders and she'd freeze, every muscle rigid, skin crawling. But he didn't force himself on her sexually, not at first. That wasn't his method. His method was slower, more insidious. He'd say things like, "You know, Eleanor, you're very lucky I'm a patient man. Another man might have taken what he wanted by now, but I respect you. I want you to come to me willingly." Or, "I've been thinking about our future together. When your medical leave ends, you'll move in here permanently. We'll say we fell in love, that it's a May-December romance. People will talk for a week, then they'll forget. You'll get your promotion, better housing, everything you wanted. All you have to do is accept this." Or, "I saw you trying the windows yesterday. Don't bother. If you somehow managed to escape and went to the police, I'd tell them you're mentally unstable, that you've been behaving erratically at work. I have documentation to support that. Performance reviews I've already drafted but not submitted. The company doctor would confirm you're on medical leave for stress-related issues. They'd think you'd had a breakdown. They might even commit you for psychiatric evaluation. Is that what you want?" He was destroying her sense of reality, making her doubt her own perceptions. Was this really happening? Was she really a prisoner? Or was she crazy, paranoid, imagining threats that didn't exist? He was so calm, so reasonable when he spoke, so confident, and she was so isolated, so cut off from anyone who might validate her experience. On the 10th day, December 19th, he tried to kiss her. She was sitting on the couch after dinner. He sat down next to her closer than usual, put his hand on her knee. "Eleanor, you're beautiful. Do you know that?" She went rigid. He leaned in, trying to press his mouth to hers. She jerked away, stood up. "No, don't." He didn't get angry, just looked at her with something like pity. "You're going to give in eventually. You know that, don't you? You've been here almost 2 weeks. If you go to the authorities now and claim I held you against your will, they'll ask why you didn't escape earlier, why you didn't scream, didn't break a window, didn't do anything. They'll assume you stayed willingly, that you're only claiming otherwise now because you got what you wanted, time off work, my attention, my mentorship, and then decided to cry victim to protect your reputation. You're trapped, Eleanor, not just in this apartment, trapped in the situation, The story's already written. The only question is how it ends. You can fight me and lose everything, or you can accept reality and gain everything you wanted. Your choice. That night, lying on the couch in the dark while Birch snored in the bedroom, Eleanor made a decision. She had to fight. If she didn't, he'd break her completely, and she'd never get herself back. She needed help, but from who? Everyone who might help was either under Birch's influence or didn't know she existed. Except one person. The cleaning woman who came to the apartment once a week. Eleanor had seen her twice, an older woman, maybe 60, Hispanic, who let herself in with a key to clean while Birch was at work. The first time, Birch had been there and introduced Eleanor as his niece visiting from out of town. The woman had nodded but said nothing, just cleaned and left. The second time, Eleanor had been alone. The woman had looked at her with sharp, assessing eyes. Hadn't said anything, but Eleanor sensed she saw something wrong. The woman was scheduled to come again tomorrow, Tuesday, December 20th. Eleanor had one chance. She needed to write a note. Get it to the cleaning woman without Birch knowing. Pray that the woman would help and not just tell Birch. She tore a page from a magazine Birch had left lying around, used a pencil stub she found in the kitchenette drawer, wrote in small, cramped letters, "My name is Eleanor Winters. I work at WARL. I'm being held in this apartment against my will by Dr. Lawrence Birch. He has my ID, my documents. He's told people I'm on medical leave, but I'm not sick. I'm trapped. He locks the door from outside. I can't leave. Please help me. Call the police or WARL security. Please. December 19th, 1966. Eleanor Winters." She folded the note tiny, hid it in her bra. The next day when the cleaning woman came at 10 a.m., Birch was at work. The door opened. Eleanor heard the key turn, watched from the bedroom doorway as a stocky woman with gray hair tied back in a bun entered carrying a bucket and mop. Maria Herrera, Eleanor would learn later. She'd been cleaning for the company housing units for 15 years, seen a lot, knew when something was wrong. Maria saw Eleanor standing in the bedroom doorway and stopped. Their eyes met. "You his niece?" Maria asked in accented English. "No," Eleanor said quietly. "I'm not." Maria set down her bucket, studied Eleanor's face, saw the fear, the exhaustion, the desperation. "You in trouble, mija?" Eleanor's throat closed up. She nodded, couldn't speak, reached into her bra, pulled out the note, held it out with shaking hands. Maria took it, read it slowly. Her face hardened. "Hijo de puta," she muttered. Then louder, "How long?" 13 days, Eleanor whispered. "He locks you in?" "Yes. Please, you have to help me, but don't tell him I gave you this." I don't know what he'll do." Maria folded the note, put it in her apron pocket. "My nephew, he's a police officer. City police, not facility security. I give this to him today after work. He'll know what to do. You understand? But you gotta hold on a little more. One more day, maybe 2. Can you do that?" Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just stay strong. And if he tries something, you fight. You hear me? You fight." That afternoon when Birch came home, Eleanor was calm, eerily calm. She'd passed the point of fear into something colder, harder. She'd done what she could. Now she just had to wait. Birch noticed the change. "You seem different today," he said over dinner. "More relaxed. Finally accepting how things are?" "Maybe," she said quietly. He smiled, satisfied. That night she lay awake on the couch, counting the hours. The next day, December 21st, Wednesday, Birch went to work as usual. Locked her in. Eleanor paced the apartment like a caged animal. Would Maria really help? Would her nephew take it seriously? Or would they dismiss it as a domestic dispute, something they didn't want to get involved in? At 2:30 p.m., she heard voices outside the door, then pounding. "Police! Open the door!" Eleanor ran to the door. "I can't! It's locked from outside! I'm trapped in here!" More pounding, then the sound of splintering wood. 2 more hits, and the lock gave way, the door frame cracking, the door swinging inward. 2 uniformed police officers rushed in, followed by a plainclothes detective. "Eleanor Winters?" the detective asked, showing his badge. "I'm Detective Frank Cordova. Are you all right?" "Yes. No. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "He locked me in. Dr. Birch. He's been keeping me here. My ID, my papers, he took them. He told everyone I was on medical leave, but I'm not. It's okay. We got the note from Maria Herrera. She's my aunt. We've been checking the story and it holds up. You were reported on medical leave, but the company doctor confirms he wrote that note as a favor to Birch without actually seeing you. That's medical fraud. And if you're saying you were held here against your will, I was. I am. He threatened to destroy my career if I didn't comply. He said he'd tell people I tried to seduce him, that he'd get me fired, blacklisted. He locked me in here for 13 days. Detective Cordova nodded grimly. He'd seen things like this before. Men with power, women with none. The system wasn't set up to protect the women. But this was kidnapping, false imprisonment, possibly more. We need your full statement, and we need to pick up Dr. Birch. Where is he now? At work. At WARL. Okay. Officers will go there now. Bring him in for questioning. You're coming to the station with me. Don't worry. You're safe now. They took her to the Los Alamos County Sheriff's Office, gave her coffee, a blanket, sat her down in an interview room. Detective Cordova and a female officer, Officer Linda Tsosi, took her statement. Eleanor told them everything. Every detail, from the first after-hours meetings to the threats to the locked apartment to the fake medical leave. Officer Tsosi wrote it all down, her expression getting darker and darker. When Eleanor finished, Cordova leaned back in his chair. Miss Winters, I'm going to be straight with you. This is going to be complicated. Dr. Birch is a respected figure with high-level connections. He'll have lawyers. He'll have character witnesses. He'll say this was consensual, that you came willingly, that you're making false allegations because the relationship ended badly. You need to be prepared for that. I know, Eleanor said quietly. But I'm telling the truth. I believe you. And here's what gives me hope. Maria Herrera is willing to testify that you were locked in that apartment, that you were clearly distressed. We have the broken lock as evidence that you couldn't leave voluntarily. We have the fraudulent medical leave documentation. And I'm betting we'll find other women. Men like Birch don't just do this once. They were right. Over the next 3 days, as word of the investigation spread, 2 other women came forward. Janet Osborne, who'd worked at WARL in 1963 to 64 and had been forced out after rejecting Birch's advances. She'd been too ashamed to report it at the time, but she'd kept documentation, threatening notes Birch had sent, copies of the false performance reviews he'd written. And Claire Donovan, who'd worked there in 1961. Her story was nearly identical to Eleanor's. Promises of promotion, private meetings, escalating demands, threats of professional destruction. Claire had eventually fled to another state rather than continue working for him. On December 23rd, Birch was arrested and charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, fraud, and abuse of authority. His security clearance was immediately suspended, pending investigation. WARL's parent company, a major defense contractor, launched its own internal investigation. The facility director, General Prescott, tried to defend Birch initially. There must be some misunderstanding. Larry's a good man, decorated veteran. But when confronted with testimony from 3 separate women, documents proving falsified medical leave, and evidence of the locked apartment,
Even he couldn't deny reality. On December 28th, Birch was terminated from WARL effective immediately. On January 4th, 1967, after a hearing that lasted 6 hours, the company's board of directors issued a public statement condemning Birch's actions and announcing policy changes to prevent such abuse in the future. They created an independent ethics hotline, mandated harassment training for all supervisors, required that all performance reviews be co-signed by 2 managers. It wasn't enough. Wouldn't have been enough to save Eleanor if she hadn't found Maria, if Maria hadn't believed her, if Detective Cordova hadn't pursued the case. But it was something. The criminal trial took place in March 1967. Birch's lawyers argued exactly what Cordova had predicted. Eleanor was a willing participant who'd regretted the affair and fabricated kidnapping claims to save her reputation. But the prosecution had the broken door lock, Maria Herrera's testimony, the fraudulent medical documentation, and testimony from Janet and Claire. The jury deliberated for 11 hours, found Birch guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. His conviction was upheld on appeal. He served 5 years before being released on parole in 1972. He died in 1979, alone, alcoholic, forgotten. Eleanor returned to work at WARL in February 1967. It was brutal at first. People stared, whispered. Some sympathized. That poor girl, what she went through. Others blamed. She should have known better than to go to his apartment. Still others dismissed it. Probably just a relationship gone bad, she's overreacting. But Eleanor kept her head down and worked harder than anyone else. When projects needed someone to pull all-nighters, she volunteered. When complex calculations needed verification, she did them. When a senior chemist went on leave, she covered his duties. Gradually, her colleagues began to respect her, not because of the scandal, but in spite of it. They respected her work. In March, she transferred to Lab 7, Composite Materials Division, under a new supervisor, Dr. Irene Vasquez, one of the few women in senior leadership at WARL. Dr. Vasquez treated her people with respect, as equals. For the first time in months, Eleanor felt like she could breathe. In June 1967, Eleanor was promoted to research associate, not out of pity, but because she'd earned it. She enrolled in a part-time PhD program at University of New Mexico in 1969, defended her dissertation in 1973, became a senior research scientist in 1975. In 1982, at age 38, she was named Director of Lab 3, the same lab where she'd started, the same lab Birch had controlled. That felt like justice, like closure, like victory. She never married, never had children. The trauma had left scars too deep. She couldn't trust easily, couldn't be vulnerable. Therapy helped. She started seeing a psychologist in 1968 and continued for years, but some wounds don't fully heal. They just become part of you. Still, she built a life, a good life. She mentored dozens of young scientists, especially women, published over 60 papers, held 14 patents, won awards from the American Chemical Society and Department of Energy, retired in 2001 at age 57 with full honors. And to every young woman who worked in her lab, she gave the same advice. If someone in power tries to exploit you, tries to use their authority to coerce you, tries to isolate you and make you feel helpless, don't stay silent. Find someone who will listen. Document everything. You are not alone, even when you feel alone. There are people who will help if you ask. I know this because I lived it. I survived. And you will too, if you speak up. Maria Herrera, the cleaning woman who'd believed Eleanor and helped her when no one else could, stayed at WARL until she retired in 1985. Eleanor visited her regularly, brought gifts, helped her financially when Maria's husband got sick.
They never talked much about that day in the apartment, but the bond between them was unbreakable. Maria died in 1992, age 73. Eleanor spoke at her funeral, told the assembled family and friends, "This woman saved my life. Not metaphorically, literally. She believed me when she had every reason not to.
She took a risk when it would have been easier and safer to look away. She saw another woman in trouble and she helped. That kind of courage, quiet, unglamorous courage, changes the world, one person at a time." She meant every word. Eleanor Winter's story is a story about power and how it corrupts when unchecked, about how closed institutions, with their secrecy, hierarchies, and cultures of obedience, become perfect breeding grounds for predators, about how systems protect abusers and blame victims, especially when the victim is a woman and the abuser is a man with status and connections. In 1966 America, there were no laws against sexual harassment in the workplace. Women who complained about being propositioned by their bosses were told to deal with it, or find another job, or were accused of being troublemakers. The phrase sexual harassment wouldn't enter common usage for another decade. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act existed, but it wasn't applied to sex discrimination consistently until the 1970s. Women had virtually no recourse. Eleanor survived not because she was stronger or smarter than the other women Birch had destroyed. She survived because she got lucky, because Maria Herrera believed her, because Detective Cordova took her seriously, because two other women, Janet and Claire, found the courage to come forward and corroborate her story. Without any one of those pieces falling into place, Birch would have gotten away with it. Eleanor would have been discredited, fired, blacklisted. Her life would have been ruined. But how many others weren't so lucky? How many women did Birch hurt before Eleanor? How many worked in other labs at other facilities, subjected to other predators who never faced consequences? The records are silent. The system was designed to keep them silent. That December of 1966 was harsh in the high desert of New Mexico. Snow blanketed the mesas, ice glazed the roads, wind howled through the canyons. People went about their lives, their work, their routines. At WARL, behind chain link and barbed wire, scientists developed materials for missiles, satellites, spacecraft. The Cold War demanded innovation, secrecy, dedication. Progress marched forward. And in one small apartment on Canyon Road, behind a locked door, a young woman sat alone and afraid, while the man who held her captive went to work each day as if nothing were wrong. No one knew. No one saw. The system functioned perfectly, for everyone except her. But Eleanor found a way out, not easily, not cleanly, not without scars that would last a lifetime. But she survived. She fought. She built a life and a career on her own terms, and she spent the rest of her life making sure other women knew they could do the same. That's the real victory. Not just escaping the trap, but ensuring others don't fall into it. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just enduring, but transforming pain into purpose. Eleanor Winters did all of that. And in doing so, she proved that even in the darkest circumstances, even when the system is rigged against you, even when power seems absolute, courage, truth, and solidarity can win. Sometimes, if you're lucky, if you speak up, if someone listens. That's the lesson she carried through her life. That's the legacy she left behind.